My name is Tim Storr, and I'm the President and CEO of Distribion. I'm very happy to be with you today and proud to sponsor today's webinar. With me is Ian Michaels, Principal Analyst at Gleanster Research. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you.
In recognition of how valuable everyone's time is, we're going to jump right into Ian's presentation. Following the presentation, I will spend about 5 minutes introducing Distribion, and then we'll go to our Q&A session. Now that the stage is set, I will turn it over to Ian Michaels. Ian?
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. All right, so we're going to talk about powering multi-channel marketing in distributed organizations. A little bit about the research findings I'm going to share with you today. So Gleanster, we do fact-based research, so we're doing surveys on key topic areas, and some of the research I'm going to leverage for today's conversation came from our marketing campaign management study in November, State of Multi-Channel Marketing, and also a distributed marketing study we did. There's a lot of really great findings, and in everything we do, we cut the data by top performing organizations. So it's like a big pivot table. We look at organizations who participated in our survey, who achieved superior performance in key metrics, such as revenue, return on marketing investment, click-through rates. We actually asked them, what was your performance in these areas, or did you improve? And then we look at what they're doing differently. So, it's very insightful to see that these organizations are more likely to leverage certain tactics or invest in certain technologies. And that's really the groundbreaking, kind of research that we're going to get from today's conversation. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about what does distributed marketing mean before we get going. And, this is such an interesting term because as I was thinking about distributed marketing, I was wondering, what is the history of this term? When did it kind of first get used? And, if you look at the word distribute, it just spread out so as to cover something. And the first known use was like the 15th century, hundreds of years ago. But you add an ED to the end, and really the first known use was 1968. So it's really a fairly new concept, and this whole notion of a distributed marketing platform is also certainly a very new concept. And I hope to put some meat on the bones here. If you've heard this term thrown around, or if you operate in an industry or an organization that has this kind of model, this is how we're talking about it in the context of research. But from a distributed is actually related to a computer network where some processes are done in workstations and information is shared. That was back in 1916 and obviously today. As we look at what it means today to be a distributed marketing organization, it's an organization with one or more brands that sells products and services through a network of local channels. And great examples of that would be like a bank where you have a local branch, but you also have a corporate entity, an insurance organization where you have local agents who sell against that national brand or global brand. Franchises, where it's a distributed organization, is one where corporate marketing mainly manages the brand consistency, puts the infrastructure in place, supports the channels, and there's a group of regionally dispersed or globally dispersed branches or offices or agents, sales and marketing individuals. So there's some key challenges for distributed organizations. And I think, if you, in the context of multi-channel, I know a lot of people probably saw the title of this webinar and thought, well, multi-channel is a challenge for everyone, and that's absolutely right. But specifically today, we're going to talk about the challenges from a multi-channel standpoint in a distributed marketing organization. And the first challenge is really this corporate control versus local autonomy. And it's this conflict of needs between corporate and local marketers. Where corporate really needs to control the brand, and therefore they have to put the boundaries on what can be done with the brand. And they have to centralize and kind of get everyone into a queue saying, yes, we're going to approve what's going on out there. And then you have your local marketers who know their target audience very well, who understand the local needs and kind of the local demographics, and they want flexibility and autonomy in how they communicate and how frequently they communicate, how they change pictures and graphics and images and creative, etc. So because of that, what you end up seeing very often from organizations that run these distributed marketing models is redundant technology spend. So you see corporate marketing investing in a multi-channel solution or an email marketing solution, and then the field or a local branch actually goes out and invests in the same technologies for use, with their personal list. And I think, unfortunately, it's easy to invest in marketing technologies these days. You can put a credit card in, you have on-demand, SaaS-based models, and it just makes it very, very easy for distributed marketers to circumvent corporate policies and things of that nature. So it creates this kind of clash of, hey, we really, at the local level, our job is to manage our target revenue. We're expected to do that, so we need some flexibility. You have redundant agency spend, you have lack of visibility into marketing. As soon as you start getting multiple technologies in place, at a corporate level, you can no longer measure and monitor what's going on across the brand, how people are engaging in different channels. You have longer sales cycles and cycle times. If marketing has to line up in a queue and get approved by corporate, that oftentimes could take weeks or months to do. And unfortunately, in this day and age, when information is 24/7 and moves at the speed of light, we literally have to be on top of key market trends. You oftentimes can't afford to wait 3 or 4 or 5 weeks for a campaign to get executed. And then more than anything, it creates a fragmented customer experience. If I'm a customer at a local branch and I opt out of communications from that branch, I also probably want to opt out to communications from the national or corporate communications. And so managing that becomes very difficult in a distributed environment. So I thought I would, in as much as Gleanster actually produces research, and I'm going to share that today, I actually thought there were some really interesting studies out there this year that were very compelling. IBM did a study with 1,700 CMOs from 65 or 64 different countries. And, that's a lot of CMOs. And, so when you see that kind of research, I always think, okay, that really sets the stage, and it should support everything we're seeing at Gleanster, which it does. But they asked 1,700 CMOs, how do you expect the level of complexity in marketing to change over the next 5 years? And 79% said they expect the level of complexity to be very high over the next 5 years. Interestingly enough, when they asked if they were prepared to deal with that complexity, only 48% said they felt like their organization was ready. And I think if you really grilled them and asked, hey, in the following areas, are you truly ready from the merging channels and all these different areas, I think you'd see that number be even smaller. But that tells you that there's really a gap in where organizations feel like they're prepared and where they need to be prepared for in the future, and they know what's coming down the line. So it's kind of that wake-up call to say, this is going to get harder, it's going to get more complicated, you got to manage it now, and staying on top of it now is important. So within that study, they asked about the top challenges for CMOs, and there were 4 that I wanted to highlight here, and these are the top 4 in rank order from the study. CMOs said explosion of data, and that was the wording in the study. But I think that data proliferation, you have lots of different channels, you have lots of different information from customer service, from sales, from marketing, and just managing that and making that actionable is very challenging for CMOs because they know the data is out there, but they're not capable of using it to optimize the customer experience. Social media and emerging channels is a top concern for them. They're not sure exactly how to grasp this whole concept of social media. Growth of channel and device choices, and then shifting consumer demographics. And I think the challenge here is these challenges are amplified in a distributed marketing organization. It's one thing to think about how complex this is for an organization that's centralized, but now you have these functional silos where they're doing their own thing, they're engaging in all of these different areas and creating their own data and going off into social channels. Managing that gets very complex. So I'm going to kind of shed some light on each one of these, but I'm going to use some of Gleanster's research and context for what we're seeing. From a data proliferation standpoint, there are a lot of different technologies in corporate alone that support marketing. When we ask marketers, how many marketing technologies does your organization regularly use? Well over 3 or more is the most common answer. That's 55% of top performers say we use 3 or more. And if you think about all these different technologies out there, email and web analytics and landing pages and social media monitoring, they're creating massive amounts of data, and oftentimes that data is fragmented, it's siloed, it's very difficult to analyze and align. And, the minute someone goes and maybe they receive an email campaign, the minute they go to the website and type in a URL by hand, you no longer know that they went through, that they were initially taking action because of that email campaign. So linking all this together is very challenging, and that makes it important from a multi-channel standpoint to start to align those communications from the channels, from the different channels into one system. Social media challenges. This idea that social media is becoming an active part of our daily lives. And I think this is hilarious. Come in and try the worst meatball sandwich that one guy on Yelp ever had in his life. And I thought it's not only funny, but it's also kind of saying it validates the notion of social media. It validates that social media matters now, and people do make decisions based on it. And this company is, while making light of it, is really embracing it as well. And I think from a distributed marketing standpoint, there's a bunch of challenges with social media. One is just monitoring customer feedback. Forget figuring out whether or not you need to actually engage in social media, because that's hard enough for some organizations to figure out, is this the right, am I in the right industry? Should I be using social media as a communication medium? But if nothing else, you should be monitoring it, because people talk about trends in the industry, people talk about your company. You have to actively see what's going on out there. So then there's joining the actual conversation. You know, how do we actually market? In distributed organization, you have field marketers or sales reps who have personal Facebook pages or Twitter pages, and they might be talking about your brand with their customers. How do you put your arms around that and basically manage brand consistency? And a lot of organizations that we see, top performing organizations, are doing that with policy, with social media policies, saying, you know, here's appropriate ways to engage in our brand, you know, across social media channels. Here are the social media outlets that we approve, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is. But just distributing that and managing that in and of itself across a distributed model is very complex. Growth in channel and device choices. I think that B2C is really transforming our B2B engagement. And I remember years ago when we were talking about social media, and it was, well, you know, business to consumer, and, you know, the more consumers, the more compelling. And I think that we've really validated over the last few years that social media has a place in a B2B model. But regardless, typically B2C tends to pull in, like, for example, search engine marketing. That was traditionally a B2C medium. And over the years, it became known as, and now everybody uses search engine marketing and paid search. But relevance really drives revenue these days. And so to the extent that you can manage your personalization and optimize personalization, you're going to differentiate your brand. And that's really important for distributed marketing organizations. I think the channel interactions typically span multiple back-end technologies these days. You don't have one system that's monitoring and measuring your mobile engagement and your social media and, you know, your email. There are platforms, and when we think about multi-channel, you probably think about campaign management or a multi-channel platform. And most of the email marketing providers that are out there, most of the technologies are all going to position around multi-channel. But what I hope to do today is really put our arms around what does it need to be for a distributed marketing organization, and why is it that those traditional solutions that have been out there for years just aren't cutting it for distributed marketing organizations. So these lack of connectivity between these different channels that are supporting the brand makes it very challenging. And then finally, shifting consumer demographics. You know, these days, consumers have tremendous influence over purchase decisions. They have access to information, they're going online, they're looking at what other people are saying, and, you know, managing that, and then as well as managing fatigue across those different channels. You know, you've got communications that are going out possibly from distributed marketing in a distributed model. You have corporate communications that are going out, but you also have communications from local marketers. And to the extent that you can allow people to opt out or manage their preferences, I prefer email, and I prefer this many times a month. You have to have that connection between corporate and the field. I think the success stories kind of set the bar with the consumer demographics perspective, and I'll talk about what I mean by that. If you look at what's going on in retail, for example, and I know this is totally not in line with the conversation today from a distributed standpoint, but where are retailers going? If you've seen Minority Report, we are really literally heading in that direction. And I went to Dreamforce a few weeks ago, the Salesforce event, at salesforce.com, and they were talking to Burberry, and Burberry is transforming their brand. The in-store experience is going to be digital. You're going to actually look in a mirror, and you can actually see an overlay of that product on you. You can see the history of the product, all the specs on the product, and it's a very digital experience. You know, it's really customized. And to the extent that those experiences are influencing how businesses react, how people expect to interact with a customer experience, we have to be, you know, cognizant of that as organizations. We have to realize that this is going to change the way people evaluate and make purchase decisions. It's going to, the tablet and iPad iPad and all these just kind of drag and drop and pinch mentality interface, it changes the way people want to consume information and make purchase decisions. And then from a social media standpoint, I think you're seeing more and more people embracing it. And down below here, I didn't want to blast the company that this went out to, but this is an executive at a very large organization who said, hey, you think sending me an anonymous letter trashing your competition is the way to earn my business? Think again. And since it's the second time I'm putting it out there. And this was just a disaster for the organization for at least a week, trying to figure out how do we deal with this. This is now out there on a social channel, and it looks very bad. And you've got to prevent that. This was a salesperson in a distributed model who was out there clearly sending information about the competition to one of his potential prospects. The broader organization wouldn't embrace that, but how do you manage that? So I think we should talk about what constitutes a customer experience in a distributed organization. And I think from a customer experience standpoint, what I largely talk about is the customer experience is every single interaction a prospect or customer has with marketing, sales, and customer service over the life of their relationship with the brand. And that means every time they make a call and they say, this product's not working, or I'm trying to figure out how to use this product, that's a touch point that you should be using to optimize marketing, to optimize your sales, your upselling, your cross-selling, et cetera. So from a distributed marketing standpoint, there's definitely this entity that is corporate, and that's where your marketing and service and their marketing messages coming out of corporate that are more, brand-oriented, more generic in nature. You have local marketing where there are messages that need to come out, multi-channel messages that are being distributed. And you have local sales, and the salespeople may be using some of marketing's materials, or they may actually be going out on their own, engaging in these different channels. And I think the shell around this is obviously a multi-channel communication platform where you can facilitate interactions across social, across email, across a landing page, across whatever medium you need to. What's interesting when we look at top performers and we ask them, what is your top 2 source of competitive advantage? And we asked this in a couple of reports in 2012. Top performers say the customer experience or the digital experience, and I should have put the digital experience, is increasingly referenced as the top 2 source of competitive advantage for the organization. They actually feel like the web and email and just the way that they engage their customers on digital channels gives them a competitive advantage. And I absolutely mirror that. I think that's true. But that means there's a window of opportunity where creating an optimal digital experience gives you a competitive advantage. And that window of opportunity narrows the more and more organizations embrace these kinds of models and these kinds of technologies that we're talking about today. This is a study from Adobe, and this was also 1,700 CMOs, so I wanted to share it with you. But what I thought about was interesting, and this is on digital marketing specifically. They asked marketers, what determines your channel spend today? And you would hope in an age where the volume of information is where it is, and we have access to so much data, that those decisions are being based on data. And when you ask these organizations, marketing executives are primarily, or the head of online is making decisions about where to spend our money in the channel. And in a distributed model, while that may be true, and you may have corporate saying these are the approved areas, you also kind of have these renegade distributed marketers out there and these local marketers saying, no, I'm going to make my own choices based on what my customer is asking for, or based on where I see my customers. And that poses an additional layer of challenges. And from this research, I thought it was interesting that 14% also had no process at all to do that. They're just kind of licking their thumb and saying, we did that last quarter, so let's do it again. Or, we've been doing that for the last 10 years, and that works for us. How do you know it's not the most optimal, approach? You don't if you don't have that kind of data infrastructure in place to measure and monitor what's working. So who actually owns the communication strategy in a distributed marketing organization? Well, you have corporate that's typically sending their own communications, and from corporate's perspective, all of the individuals in a target audience are their audience. They are the brand, and everyone's going to facilitate communications with that brand at some point about something. So you have to manage and monitor that. But in a local setting, like a local branch from a bank, for example, they have a target audience, and there may be a very specific demographic in that target audience that precludes corporate from positioning around. Maybe the corporate communications are too generic. And you see these branch and these local marketers sending very targeted communications and maybe it's a demographic target where you have, in your area you have lots of families and there are a certain demographic, maybe it's Hispanic families. You would want to personalize the communication to show images of Hispanic families on your email campaigns, on your PDFs and your collateral that's in your bank. And corporate may not be capable of doing that. So that's why you see these renegade mentalities where they're saying, well, it matters. If you want us to reach our targets at a local level, we need some autonomy and control in this. So let's talk about how the technology stack typically looks in a distributed organization. And this is the problem today. And the information flow between corporate and local is very disconnected. And so you'll see corporate marketing typically investing in either one or multiple technologies. We saw over 3 is the typical infrastructure, but it could be a multi-channel platform that provides email and web analytics and preference management and all these things, campaign management tools. And that's owned by corporate. And what they would demand from local audiences is, listen, if you want to run a campaign, you go through us. You get approval, you fill out the workflow, and you get into a queue, and we will send the campaign, but you can tell us what you want us to do. And we'll use this infrastructure to do that, and it will centralize everything. But unfortunately, waiting for them to send the campaign, or it may be that corporate doesn't even engage in channels that local marketers need to. Then you see local marketers, branch 1 and branch 4, investing in their own email marketing. Because guess what? It's really cheap. You can put your credit card in and you can send an email to a list of 5,000. And now they've got separate preference management. Let's say someone opts out of that email campaign, or do they have access to brand-approved assets? How do they get them? Is corporate putting them out there in time where they can actually incorporate them into email? So what ultimately happens is you have this real big disconnect between brand consistency, communication frequency between the branch and corporate with that one individual. Personalization is not happening because you don't know, and maybe at a local level it is, but certainly not at a corporate level. And just holistic analytics. Do you know that this person even gives a darn? Did they open the campaign? Did the message resonate with them? Corporate doesn't have visibility of that, and the branch doesn't have visibility of what's going on in corporate. So how do you fix that? Well, to set the stage here, two data points. 40% of marketing assets are never used by sales teams in a distributed marketing organization, and 40% of sales rep time is spent customizing materials. So there's this real division. In addition to these communication challenges and managing the multi-channel messaging, it's just very challenging for salespeople to even actually leverage. I mean, that's almost half of everything marketing produces isn't used by salespeople. And to the extent that salespeople are going to find a way around that, probably create their own collateral or customize their own decks or do their own thing, that impacts the brand because they don't typically have access to brand-approved assets and creative, and they don't know what the creative look and feel is for the brand. So it creates a lot of challenges. So let's look at what top-performing companies are actually doing differently. What technology do they use, and how do they outperform peers in the distributed marketing environment? And I hate to start off on a negative, but I thought it was interesting. Crunching the data is still a massive challenge for top performers. So I'd love to sit here and say, oh yeah, they got it all figured out, and they're using the data to make data-driven decisions. But even when you ask these organizations that outperform their peers, what are the top challenges with respect to multi-channel and distributed marketing organization? A top 3 challenge is consistently making data-driven decisions, and it's the top 10 challenge for top performers. So it's always there. It's typically in a top 3 setting. So what that means is you've got to simplify this process. So the question is, and the first thing that I wanted to understand in this distributed research I was doing is, do local marketers have the ability to send an email campaign? And what I uncovered was actually pretty interesting. So when we asked what are the top challenges you're faced with, brand consistency was not a top challenge for top performers. They did not say that, hey, we struggle to manage the brand. So something's working in these organizations. They are able to put their arms around the brand and manage it effectively. But they're also able to allow local marketers, and you can see here they're like 1.6 times more likely to allow local marketers to actually send email campaigns. And I was scratching my head on this. I was like, well, how do they actually control the brand if local marketers are sending their own email campaigns? And that's where we started to dive in and look at what technologies actually facilitate multi-channel communications in these organizations. So they're 7 times more likely than everyone else to actually invest in top performers, or 7 times more likely to actually invest in distributed marketing technologies. These are technologies that are multi-channel centric, that are specifically built for the challenges in a distributed organization. They're 12 times more likely than everyone else to use dynamic template capabilities for digital marketing. And by the way, I don't remember if I actually mentioned it. Everyone else is all other organizations. It's all non-top performing organizations. So what are the challenges, and how do they mitigate some of these challenges? And we call this value drivers in our research. But these are the ways that companies extract value from the technologies and strategies that they're investing in. And so from a distributed marketing standpoint, the top 3, number 1 for top performers was the increased marketing relevance and personalization. I said it before, relevance drives revenue these days. Top performers are validating that. They're saying, yes, by improving our personalization in our multi-channel messaging, we are driving more revenue for our organization. They provide more autonomy and control for local marketers. That's the second most common thing that they say needs to happen to extract value from multi-channel messaging. And they improve marketing cycle time. So I think you're seeing a lot of these investments in distributed technologies are being justified by the fact that our cycle time is really long. We're not able to get in front of the market as quickly as we need to, nor are we able to personalize those communications the way we need to. And the challenge is, if you work in an industry, or if your company operates in an industry where one of your competitors is leveraging these distributed marketing tools, you're at a distinct disadvantage, because they are capable of managing those communications and facilitating a brand, consistent brand across different channels. So I want to talk about how this actually works. And one of the things that we saw from top performers in this research here, increasing marketing relevance and personalization, one of the ways they do that is with a capability that really is native to a distributed marketing platform, and it's not typically included in other platforms. And it's a differentiator for these technologies. And it's called dynamic templates. And if you have a customer here, here's this guy, Todd. He's in his early 40s. He has 1 child, and he just had a 2nd child. And he lives in the suburbs. And the question is, you're a distributed organization. You have corporate, and you have local, kind of the local sales rep knows Todd quite well. How do you personalize a message to Todd? Well, in a traditional model, in a traditional distributed communication, you would have corporate sending email campaigns on a periodic basis. And those campaigns are very generic, and they know about Todd because they have a history of his profile in their system, and they're going to try to put him into the right segment and target him appropriately. And then you have the local branch, and that local branch manager, well, he has a social media account and he knows Todd, and so he actually wrote on Todd's social media account, "Congratulations on the newborn." And that intimate communication is, corporate isn't capable of doing that, but it makes it a very intimate brand interaction with Todd. And so to the extent that the branch may also have invested in an email tool, maybe Todd is actually getting a congratulations email specifically from that local branch, or a very personalized message saying, "Oh, we see your family is getting bigger. Maybe it's time for you to start thinking about life insurance," or some product based on this actual behavior. And it's at a very intimate level. So that would be a traditional model. This would be split up. With a dynamic template, what this actually does in a distributed marketing platform, it allows corporate marketing to create multi-channel templates. You could have a template for email, templates for your PDF and print collateral, separate templates for landing page, and I've marked blue and gray areas on these templates. And so these are brand-approved templates where corporate can lock some of what's on that template and say, this shouldn't be touched. This is our consistent brand across channels. This is where our logo goes, and you don't get to touch that, Mr. Local Marketer. But we are going to open up and allow you to customize the text. We might allow you to customize the creative, and maybe you can change out your picture. You put a picture of a family. You certainly wouldn't want to give Todd a picture of 2 young people going out in a nightclub. It's not the right message for Todd. He has a family now. So that allows local marketers to actually leverage this system to use those brand-approved templates to customize communications. And what's nice is all of this is happening from a single platform. So this dynamic template capability is actually a very critical component to a distributed model. And it is something that we're seeing top performers leverage. And they're almost 5 times more likely to leverage it than all other organizations that are using these technologies. So what does that mean? Well, if you have dynamic capabilities, if you have the ability to manage all of these multi-channel communications from one system, then your local marketers get to select the channel that they want to leverage. Your local marketers get to select the message they want to say on that channel. Local marketers can manage personalization in that message, and they can also stay brand compliant. And messages are tracked and centralized. And ultimately, that means corporate marketing controls the brand and centralizes measurement. I mean, this is actually addressing those challenges that create friction between corporate and local marketers. All right, so if I was to put together kind of what makes up a distributed marketing platform? I think that there are maybe four very unique areas and three that are critical that need to be a part of a distributed marketing platform, and that also, frankly, differentiate a distributed marketing platform from a multi-channel platform that would traditionally be used by a single entity organization. So from a multi-channel standpoint, you certainly need the ability to facilitate campaigns, to execute those campaigns, to go in and get approved on campaigns, and to actually do both corporate communications and local communications from this platform. You need multi-channel integration. This is a really key area because what you often see from multi-channel systems is that there's a handful, maybe two, maybe there's email and there's some web analytics capabilities, but it's not a true multi-channel platform. And until you start to incorporate rich media and print collateral and social media and facilitate multi-channel communications across those areas, it's really not addressing all the different ways your local audiences might want to interact with the brand. Dynamic templates is a core unique differentiator for these systems. Contact management, the ability to load a list. You have local audiences that have their own list of individuals that corporate may not have. That makes a lot of corporate marketers cringe. They want to have that centralized management, but to the extent that they could load that list and still give corporate access to see how people perform and how they can manage the overall interaction with those individuals is really critical. Preference management is a really key area that these systems have to manage. It doesn't work to have separate systems because you cannot manage people opting in or out of communications. You can't manage them saying, well, I really just want to receive emails from you. Please stop sending me direct mail. And unless you have one system to manage all those preferences, you can't do that with multiple systems. Digital asset management. You have to have the ability, if you're going to allow people to personalize all these different multi-channel areas, email and print and things, you have to have brand-approved assets. And frankly, you need a library of brand-approved assets to say, if you want to customize, here's what you can use to customize these templates and collateral. And these are brand-approved. They're our look and feel. This is how we want to use, and engage with people. So having some kind of element of digital asset management in this system is very critical. Measurement and analytics. With everything in one place, you can actually measure a lot more effectively. And I think what's powerful is it gives corporate marketing the ability to see at a holistic level and measure and analyze campaign performance. But it puts measurement and analytics in the hands of local marketers, which never really happens. In a distributed model, typically your corporate marketing entity would be doing analysis. They have a core team, it could be in finance or it could be in operations that actually does reporting, and they get back and they meet with local audience members and say, local marketers, here's your performance on your campaigns over the last 3 weeks. The timeliness of that analysis is not useful for local marketers. So a system like this empowers local marketers to actually go in and look at performance and make changes in real time if they need to. And I think there's one more bubble that's not in here, and that's spend management, co-op spend management. In a distributed organization, and you might have a shared spending model, and to the extent that these systems can help manage that and actually manage, the brand or the local branch saying, hey, we're going to pay for half of this campaign with co-op funds, and then we'll come up with the other half, et cetera, in one system. It's pretty powerful, and it's rare to see that in a system these days, in a distributed system. So that's why it's not in the bubble here, but I think it needs to be addressed. All right, so before I wrap up, I think there are some challenges, and what we see from top performers is, and when we ask them, how do you overcome these challenges? From a distributed marketing standpoint, first and foremost, how do you actually get people to adopt the technology? And a lot of organizations, a lot of corporate marketers even look at these systems and go, that's really compelling, I like it, but how the heck am I going to force my local branch or my distributed marketers to adopt it? How do I get them to not circumvent my process? And what works well about a distributed marketing platform that does not work for a multi-channel platform that's just built for, kind of a single organization approach is, the platform basically gives those marketers at a local level autonomy. It empowers them. It replaces what they were otherwise doing and still gives them the ability to achieve the same result. And to the extent that that system is easy to use, is accessible for local marketers, and it's multi-channel, true multi-channel, so they don't have to circumvent the system to go off and communicate with their local audience on another channel, that's going to drive performance, and that's going to drive adoption of the system. I think the system, if it's easy to use, it definitely minimizes training requirements. That is a core value. When you talk to organizations that have invested in these solutions, they constantly say, well, we didn't have to put together a massive training program. It was pretty easy to embrace the system. It doesn't do, very, very deep capabilities at a local level, and that's by design. You want to just empower them, make it easy for them to send a campaign. You don't need to give them all the bells and whistles that would traditionally be in a corporate or an enterprise level solution. And frankly, at a local level, they don't have the resources to leverage those capabilities anyhow. You typically see people who are new to using a system at all. Maybe they've never sent an email campaign. So you got to make it easy to use. And if it's a salesperson, that's probably the case. They probably aren't used to using some of these different technologies. And then to the extent you can augment reporting and analytics for local marketers, give them some power, give them some control over seeing and on-demand real-time reports to see what's working and optimize in real time and not wait for corporate to give them the analysis on whether or not that campaign was successful is really powerful. And it makes them want to continue using that one system because as they build a history of communications with their target audience, they start to want to compare and benchmark, and then it no longer makes sense for them to circumvent that system because they have everything they need right there on a multi-channel platform. So we've got a deep dive that we just finished, actually. We just published, and you will receive this at the end of the presentation here. It's called How Top-Performing Distributed Marketers Power Multi-Channel Marketing. And there's some additional insights in the deep dive that I didn't talk about on the webinar today. If you have questions, feel free to email me. I'll put my contact information up. And then we've also got a hashtag here. If you want to engage on Twitter, I'll monitor that hashtag over the next couple hours if you have questions and things that you want to engage in. I'm going to pass it back to you, Tim.
Great. Thank you, Ian, for a terrific presentation. Hello again, everybody. My name's Tim Storr, and I'm the President and CEO of Distribion. Before we jump into the Q&A session, I'd like to just take a few minutes and introduce Distribion. Distribion is a leading multi-channel distributed marketing platform provider. Our solution was built specifically to address the challenges that Ian just highlighted within today's presentation. Our distributed marketing platform can be found within many regulated industries such as financial services, insurance, and healthcare, as well as within organizations that support large franchisee or VAR sales channels. We currently service over 150 customers representing over 180,000 users. Now, a little about how our solution works. First, without a doubt, the most critical ingredient to successfully implementing any distributed marketing software solution is ease of use. Ian covered this, but again, I cannot stress this enough. The solution must provide the fastest, easiest, and most effective means for local marketers to communicate with their customers and prospects. If it doesn't, then adoption will obviously suffer. In addition, it must also be just as easy for all corporate marketing users as well. The solution is truly only as good as the content housed within it. So implementing a solution that allows the corporate marketing team to easily do things such as load content, create templates, set compliance approval flows, and access reports that provide meaningful insight into exactly how the solution is being used are all equally as important. All that being said, the first thing the corporate marketing team does is load their assets and put together their campaign programs. Once materials and campaigns have been set, local marketers simply log in and update their profile. Now, the profile information stored in the system can consist of everything including logos, pictures, bios, contact information, and more. All of that information can be utilized to dynamically assemble and personalize marketing materials within the system. Once their profile is updated, they simply upload their contact list and then select a campaign to send. With just a few clicks, a local marketer can send out an integrated multi-channel campaign that's been personalized from them to their contacts. The campaign can include email and direct mail, automated social posts to the local marketer's social networks, dynamically assembled and personalized microsites that can also include links to personalized brochures, videos, and even contact forms that can be used to solicit feedback and generate leads. Campaign summary reports with detailed campaign statistics are also automatically emailed to the local marketer immediately following the sending of the campaign. At Distribion, we feel that our solution truly differentiates itself regarding its ease of use. And to really help illustrate this, we will be providing all webinar registrants with the ability to experience multi-channel distributed marketing for yourselves today at no cost. Once you've played around in our demo sandbox and got to experience our solution, we'd like for you to consider conducting a true pilot for your organization via our proven Quick Start program. We'll be sending out additional information regarding all of this concluding today's webinar program. With that, we'll jump into our Q&A session. First question, will the slides be available after the event? Absolutely. We do intend on, we have been recording this, and we do intend on publishing the webinar recording, and we will also make the content of the presentation available as well. So no problem there. Let's see here. Next question. Is there a way for corporate to send messages for an agent if they are too busy or just won't do it themselves? Great question, and I'll go ahead and cover this one, and Ian, please feel free to chime in on any of these as well. We are definitely seeing a lot of clients and prospects exploring what we call these on behalf of marketing opportunities, or OBO for short. You know, everyone certainly wants to feel empowered and be able to customize and personalize content at the local level, but sometimes, depending upon the organization or the field representatives, there are representatives that would love to just simply opt into certain campaigns, upload their lists, and then have the corporate marketing team market on their behalf just as if they did it themselves. Our platform in particular does allow for these types of OBO capabilities, and we've seen that in many instances where organizations leverage an OBO strategy, that they can truly save the local marketer a significant amount of time, but it also helps the corporate marketing team by ensuring that campaigns are going out on a consistent basis out there at the local level. So, you know, definitely seeing a lot of these, and regarding our solution, we do allow for that. Ian, is that something that in your research that ever came up?
You know, yes. I think I don't have massive trends, but I think that, you know, I get statistics to prove it, but I think that's very common. And you know, the other thing that's common is the ability to just, within a lead nurturing type, you know, campaign, actually initiate that after a form is filled out on a landing page on the corporate site, initiate that personal communication as part of just, you know, unbeknownst to the actual rep. It just goes out and it adds their contact information. So absolutely. I mean, I would say it's the best practice because it's getting you that personal level of or facilitating that personal communication.
Great. Next question. Is it possible to coordinate campaigns such as email, direct mail, and social all at one time? Absolutely. You know, again, speaking from the Distribion perspective, we refer to that as multi-channel bundling. So, you know, as opposed to necessarily putting just one asset out there or one campaign that people can go in and customize and send out to their local targets, you can actually provide them with a bundled multi-channel campaign that they can simply go in, and it might have, for example, within just that one campaign, an email, some social content that's going to post out at different time intervals, a direct mail piece that'll go out in 30 days, and maybe a link to a microsite that has other personalized information, brochures, whatnot. So yes, absolutely, it's possible to coordinate that. That's one of the things that our solution provides, and I know that was one thing that Ian did speak to in the presentation regarding.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add another layer to that, because I think the question kind of speaks at the heart of this idea behind multi-channel marketing, and it's, what is multi-channel marketing? Is it multiple campaigns on multiple channels, or is it actually facilitating a single campaign across multiple channels? And I think the best practice that we've seen in the research is, and I like to call it cross-channel marketing, but it can be called multi-channel, but it's truly, and the word that differentiates is orchestrate. It's an orchestrated campaign across multiple channels. And it is definitely a differentiator for a kind of world-class customer experience. And when you see your channels reinforcing each other, it stands out, because most cases, most organizations are capable of sending separate, disparate campaigns across different channels. They don't align. The brand may not be consistent. The message may not be consistent. And think about, from a customer perspective, they're channel agnostic. I don't care. It's an interaction with the brand to me. So, I just want to interact with the brand where I want to. So it's really important that you're delivering the same consistent message across channels.
And I'm going to go ahead and combine a couple questions here, because I think they all touch on the same theme. Ian, maybe I'll tee you up on this one first. The first part of the question really pertains to automated triggers. A lot of questions coming in regards to what role do automated triggered messages play in the distributed marketing platform model, and are there any best practices around that? And then in particular, a second part of that is does the Distribion platform support that? So I'll let you answer that first part, Ian.
Yeah, so typically automated triggers, there's kind of two types of triggers. There's automating based on drip or time. So after a period of time, you're going to send a communication, and then maybe you're going to wait 3 months. And then there's automation based on behavior. Those are behavioral triggers. So someone clicks on a campaign, someone fills out a form, and that initiates a specific action. And automation for the sake of automation is not very useful. But when you align it to the way people are purchasing, and with content that engages them across their actual buying cycle, so do they know they have a challenge yet? If they don't, you want to speak to them, you want to give them materials that educate them, so when they're ready to have a conversation with sales, or when they're ready to make a purchase decision, they actually understand the problem that you're addressing. So to the extent that automation can actually help facilitate relevant communication, it's critical. It is absolutely critical, because you know what? Marketing is not going to be able to do it. You can't do it manually. You have to, people are on the website, middle of the night sometimes, weird times, and you want to get them that information in a real-time fashion, because it's relevant to them at that period of time. And then I think secondly, it does not need to be complex. You see a lot of organizations putting together these very complex nurturing cycles and all these different branches and things, and it's the wrong approach. Simplify it. Same thing to the system. System should be simplified. Well, your campaign should be simplified as well. So.
Ian, I completely agree with you, and I think just to give a practical example there, yes, to answer the one of the questions, the Distribion platform does support triggered messaging, and one of the things that we find that a lot of our clients are leveraging regarding our solution and triggered messaging is a very practical, simple example to Ian's point. Maybe having a campaign that the local marketer can opt into, such that on a client or prospect's birthday, an automated message automatically goes out wishing them a happy birthday, and it's being personalized from their local agent or regional representative with their contact information back to them. So, there's those types of very simple, practical examples that can definitely provide some real-world value in the distributed organization. Okay, let's see here. Next question. And this one's a great one. How do you manage opt-outs when someone opts out of a field communication? Ian, I can definitely speak to how we do that, but would love to tee that up to you if you'd like to take a crack at maybe what some top performers and how they handled that.
Yeah, so there's two ways to do that. I mean, I think you have to have some kind of a centralized preference management, and I spoke to that during the slides a number of times because it's really important. But how do you actually get them to opt out? Well, you can literally on your preference management give them check marks. One is, I don't want to receive communications from the brand or corporate at all, or I just want to stop receiving communications from my local branch. And give them the checkbox, because I think the more options you give people to customize, the less likely they are to get frustrated, number one. And number two, you really don't want them to opt out altogether. You may, maybe they're annoyed by how frequent the local branch is giving them communications, but they still like your brand. So you give them those options. But I think that would be the best practice, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys have to say.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I do agree. Now, with what we found is, in addition to everything you said, which is absolutely correct, it truly does depend somewhat also upon how your contact relationships are structured. And what I mean by that is, we have a lot of organizations that have there's a lot of complexity associated with distributed marketing models in general. And there's all sorts of different things or structures that you have to address depending upon how the organization is set up. So what do I mean by that? Well, take, for example, if you're an insurance carrier. Well, you've got to deal with potentially all independent agents or captive agents, or a mixture of both. Well, you might also have to deal with MGA, BGAs, IMO, or FMOs that represent somewhat a middle layer within regards to the distributed model, where the carrier supports them, but then they support their own field network. So there can be a lot of complexities that can make a distributed model very different depending upon the type of organization that it's being applied to. So how that all relates back to opting out or preference management, again, back to how those contact relationships are structured. In a very simplistic sense, there can be a contact ownership model where there's a single instance, single owner. So what I mean by that is there's one contact that lives in the system and it's owned by one agent. Okay? There can be a single instance, multiple owner. So you might have one contact that's in the system, but it could potentially be owned by more than just one agent, right? Because it could be all independents. And then there's multiple instance, multiple owners. So you might have that IMO, FMO, MBA, BGA model where the carrier's providing this distributed marketing platform out there, and you have to provide them the ability to where they almost all have their own instance, so to speak, of that contact, and they can all own it individually, such that that provides all the various different layers of opting out that could play into this, that a solution might need to be able to address depending upon, again, your structure. Let's see here. Next question. How much time and effort is required to get a platform set up and live? Ian, would you like me to speak to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you better say not a lot.
Yeah, good advice. We take an approach at Distribion where we really recommend that our prospects start out with what we refer to as our Quick Start program. And that's something I alluded to a little bit earlier. And what that really entails from a setup perspective is it takes less than 30 days to really get it up and going. I mean, as far as getting a system branded and up and live, we can literally do that almost instantaneously. But there is a lot of time that's got to get devoted to making sure the users are set up right, importing or syncing contacts, incorporating the collateral, and also, working with the client to establish a few multi-channel campaign programs that, again, then really get them up and going. And as we're doing that setup, we're really simultaneously training you on how to really use and administer the system. And once that's really all set up and ready to go, we then will support you for another 60 to 90 days, really helping to closely monitor the system to ensure that it's being used the way it should and it's generating the type of results that it should. So, I would plan on, really about a 90-day program in order to really, get it not only set up, but get everybody trained, get everything in there. Start off with some various different focus groups, small user groups. Make sure that it's being worked the way that it needs to, it's working the way it should, and then look to publicize it and get it live out into the marketplace with all your agents.
I'm glad you said that, because I think, I seriously was joking when I said not a lot, because you have to be practical about adoption of these kinds of systems. This is a transition management challenge. It's a change management for your organization. It's going to change process. It's going to change the way people interact and how field marketers request campaigns or have, or use the system. So in as much as it's a technology challenge, it's also just like a process and a people challenge. And you can't go so fast that you don't allow people to talk and understand what's going to change and voice their opinion about what their concerns are, and then learn to embrace the new system. So I think that's something you want to consider. It's not a reason to not use the system. It's just recognize that you have to change people and the organization and process the organization in order for this system to be valuable.
Absolutely, and exactly what you said. Just to dovetail on the end of that, I mean, you're typically talking many times on rolling this out to thousands of users potentially. So, as Ian, as you correctly alluded to, I mean, that is a monstrous change management process, and something that you want to make sure that you've really orchestrated and set it up for success. Okay, so one more question. We're coming up on our hour, and I guess we'll close out on this. Please do rest assured, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all of the questions. But we will definitely follow up with everybody who has asked questions, and we'll make sure that you do get your question answered. Okay, so last question. How do I use my data within a distributed marketing platform? Ian, I'm happy to field that one if you'd like to take a shot at it as well.
I I'd love to know. I mean, I think you're probably the appropriate one to field it.
Yeah, so...
And then I can add content.
Sure. So, there are a lot of ways to incorporate data within a distributed marketing platform. Speaking in respect to our solution, which I think is where the question was directed, you can upload data directly into the solution, or you can leverage our API where you can integrate with common data sources such as Salesforce.com, Microsoft Dynamics, Pivotal, Google Analytics, Omniture, many others. We've really taken the viewpoint and definitely back to centralization of data as one of the key elements that Ian alluded to in the presentation. We've really strived to ensure that our solution can work in unison with other rich data sources, so to ensure that marketers are provided with the largest and most meaningful data set possible. So, definitely integration is something that should strongly be considered where applicable, but sometimes it may not be applicable because, again, you may have an independent agent layer where those independent agents aren't going to be on, for example, your same CRM platform. So you've got to provide the ability for them to upload their list, but maybe on the back end at corporate, you want to have some synchronization with regards to your Salesforce instance. So flexibility in regards to ensuring that data can flow in and out of the platform depending upon how you're set up is definitely something that should be considered going through the implementation process. Okay, so with that, we're at our hour. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to meet with us today. Ian Michaels' information in regards to his Twitter account is up here on the screen, and again, we'll be following up with additional information following today's webinar. So again, thank you all very much for attending, and we look forward to speaking with everybody in the very near future. Take care.